This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
One of the questions I was asked is, what is more effective in terms of teaching, when someone is teaching, to try to prove Hashem or to just learn with him Torah, other aspects of Torah, to try to engage them?
Big question. No, first of all, if I may say so, there is, like, people think it's more sophisticated if they say, if you ask them, why don't you keep Torah and mitzvahs, your grandpa was a religious Jew. He said, no, I don't believe in God. So, you don't believe in God. You've looked into it, you've dealt, you've understood, you've studied all the discussion on these topics, you've involved yourself with it. What do you mean you don't believe in God? Don't believe in God is like an excuse that people use. It's finer than saying I'm a Baal Taiva. I want to have a good time. I want to be on the beach. I want to do whatever I want to do. What do I need all these limitations for? So I don't believe in God. You're a big philosopher. You've been through the Moire Nevuchim. You've learned Sisrei Torah. You know what God is about. Can you tell me anything about God? Nothing. Zero. And you say you don't believe in God. Don't believe in God. Stupid. But people use it as it's like, a nicer way of saying that he wants to live a life of hefker, with no rules and regulations and no limitations. There are different types of Jews all over the world. I mean, it's worthwhile knowing. If you go to Sephardic communities, even in America, you ask a Yid, a Syrian Jew, do you believe in God? It's a question, of course. Do you believe in Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu? Of course. Do you keep mitzvahs? No. Why not? Well, I don't know. We live in a different world today, but of course. So there, in those cases, there's no purpose and no need to discuss belief in God. Believe. It's just that they're taking an easy route out to what they think is a more enjoyable life, which of course is wrong. But there are people who have been very heavily indoctrinated by the modern world, by all sorts of philosophies and all sorts of cultures, which they accept as truths. Really, all scientific opinions or philosophical opinions are all theories. The only fact in the world is Torah. It stood its ground for 3,500 years. The Gdolei Israel knew everything about everything. Even in this last generation, the Haskalah affected very, very, very strongly young yeshiva boys in Europe before the Second World War. From before the First World War and during the period in between the two world wars. And many of those Gdolei Israel who were Marbitze Torah and Rosh Yeshivas, they had learned Haskalah in their young days. It was very tempting, and there was a lot of in every family there were people already who were completely sold to Haskalah, and they were pulling their cousins and their brothers and sisters and trying to get them away from Torah. The Chofetz Chaim himself, he used to mention somebody and curse him. Yimach Shemoy. And what was the story? This person, he was a big Messi to Mediach. He used to come to yeshiva boys who he saw them promising and try and convince them to leave the yeshiva and come to and get them into universities. And this one almost succeeded with the Chofetz Chaim. We look at the Chofetz Chaim like, a Malach Hashem from Shamayim. He was. But there were difficulties. So what I want to say, my point is that no one was naive, and none of these Gdolim didn't know the other side. They know all about it, and still Derech HaTorah is emes. It's stood up to all the situations. So I'm saying it depends very much on communities. Communities that do feel that they need some concept, so we have to give them some concepts of Emunah. But the real thing, as Hazal say, Ha'ma'or sheba machziran lemutav. And that was the second word my Rosh Hashiva told me, Rabbi Gurovitz, it's about already 35 years ago. He says, the main thing is Gemara. Let them learn Gemara, the light of the Gemara will bring them back to the emes. That's the way to do it. I'm considered the head of Avos Shalom. We have an institution called Shalom La'am. We have a few hundred outposts all over Israel where we do work with secular Israelis. A team of 600 Avrechim who are running these centers, where they get every evening boys, girls, separately obviously, and teach them Torah. And the starting point is that they're indoctrinated atheists, and they look at a rabbi like a Spanish bull looks at a red cape. And we see tremendous hatzlocha, unbelievable hatzlocha at different stages. And we do it through Gemara, nothing else. We published every year a book, and maybe I should bring it here. It's probably the best Shitta Mekubetzes on the Masechtas that we have today. Bachurim Hilonim, what we call, with eye ring and tongue ring and lip ring and toe, every ring you can imagine. They learn Gemara, and we tell them you have to write your first ever Chidush on the Gemara. And we printed up the Chidushim, 1,000 Chidushei Torah from secular Israeli kids. We print them with their picture, with their town where they come from, or their village, or their kibbutz, or wherever they're from, and they have their first ever chidush in a Shitta Mekubetzet, full of Torah, emes Torah. They're saying things which can be learned, they can be looked into and understood. So what do we see from here? We see that through Gemara you bring them back. There's another thing, we print like a comic strip. Maybe you've seen it, Shalom La'am. So it's very popular. We print 300,000 every week. We're already by number 800, I don't know. But 300,000 and the chap, and it's available on the internet. The most, how you say, exciting and interesting point in this comic strip is a quiz. We have a Choshen Mishpat Sheila, which any Dayan can be asked. Modern, up-to-date shaila about someone took his neighbor's car without permission, had an accident, it had no insurance, etc. Who is responsible for any damage, etc. Something like that. And we give them the tzionim. So the answer is Toifes, Dibro Matilzeh, Daf Pluni, Baba Metzia, Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, Me'irat Enaim, or Shach, or whatever. Now you get all these secular kids running around to the synagogues. What's Baba Metzia? They have this Baba. Yeah, what's Tosfot? This is Tosfot. They're looking in, they get the prize for it. And then all of a sudden, after they do this, they become aware that the Torah is fully up to date. Very interesting, brilliant, answering all the questions of up-to-date life and relating to every single situation in the world. And the whole concept changes. It's not just some old book that you chant. They may think, like something like that. That was the opinion of religion. All the time they see it's deep and exciting and interesting and beautiful, and they get linked up. So I think the way is through, a lot of it has to be done through Torah. But there is an Indian, of course, to teach a Kriyat Emunah that people should know.
In a case that a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man, and you feel like you can be makarev the woman and perhaps the children afterwards, should we show acceptance in the beginning in order to be makarev them? Or is it a problem since we run the risk of showing that we approve the marriage?
So the man is non-Jewish and the woman is Jewish. Her children are fully Jewish. She is fully Jewish. So we have an obligation to be mikarev her. We're not getting involved. We're not condoning the wedding. It's a Bedi Evet situation. They're married anyway. She didn't ask us whether she should get married. She's married. But she's Jewish. Her children are Jewish. We have to do everything we can to teach them and encourage them. And whatever will be with the marriage will be. We don't run the world. I knew a lady in London. She was a very, very great lady, a very big supporter of Torah. I'm sure Aish Torah had kasher with her as well. And her husband was a goy, and he never converted, but he respected her. And he used to take the children to shul every Shabbos. As a goy, he's coming to shul with his children, making sure they daven. Very, very strange, but I know, such a thing existed.
Should he be encouraged to be mitgayer? Should he be encouraged to be
Look, that's the whole side of Giyuv. Do we encourage, don't we encourage?
But in that case, in this case,
If it'll be a real conversion, that he really wants to take on to be a Yid in Torah and mitzvahs, yeah. In the meantime, we have an obligation to the Jewish mother and the kids, and do our best to keep them showing me Torah and mitzvahs.
Someone who has dedicated himself to a life of full-time avodas hakodesh, when would it be permissible, in what circumstances, to take a side job that's not involved directly in the avodas hakodesh?
He needs parnosa, in other words.
That or maybe help his creativity, or what cases would be permitted?
Look, it's a very general question, and I think each case has to be dealt with individually. Someone who has a potential, he's very successful in his learning, and if he carries on learning, he could be a gadol b'teira. That's his first duty. Us to help him to grow, and him to carry on growing. There's nothing better. If he's not holding at that level, and it seems you implied that he's learning, but he's not feeling he needs he feels he needs other involvements. Yes?
Or he's involved in teaching all day. He's involved in kibbutz.
So what?
Is there any circumstance that it'd be okay for him to take on something else?
I presume it very much depends. Can he manage with what he has? Does he need more financially? In a modest way. We don't have to work to be millionaires. Hashem can make it with the press of a button. There are people who, involved with some sort of a business, and they give it an hour or two a day, and they're billionaires. It can happen. But there are different shittahs. Reb Chaim Volozhiner in Nefesh HaChaim, he writes ba'arichas on this, and he says the machlokes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, if you have only to learn or you're allowed to work, like the pasuk says, that means you'll have brocha, I'll give you brocha, you'll have crops, you'll have fruit, you'll have vegetables, you'll have bounty, sheep and cattle, you'll have everything. So he writes that's a big curse, because it's taking you away from learning. So how can the Torah say, if you keep my mitzvahs, I'm going to give you bounty, you'll have everything? It's a curse. So he says, even Rabbi Shmuel agrees to Rashbi that you have to be in learning. And if you do get a job, this is a very extreme opinion, I admit, there's no one holds like him. If you even do have to work to the amount of lechem lechol beged lilbosh, that you have food to eat and clothes to wear, that's how he says it, then you have to choose a job which doesn't involve your mind, that while you're working, your mind is in Torah. So let's say you're a driver, or a carpenter, or a cobbler, so your mind can be in learning. But this is very extreme. To say that throughout the Doiras it was like that, no. Both by the Sfardim, by the Ashkenazim, you had Doile Yisrael, who were Nehenim Yigio. They felt that was the shit of the Rambam, that if you can earn a living with a couple of hours of involvement, like the Rambam writes, 9 hours learning, 3 hours parnosa. He wrote it in Hilchos Talmud Torah. So if we can do it like that, that probably is good. But then again, it depends on the generation and the need of a person. If we have someone who could really be a great leader in Klal Yisrael, or very great in outreach and be Mizaki Rabbi more and more and more, so maybe we do have to keep him involved in Avodas HaKodesh, because Klal Yisrael needs such people. So it's very individual. We have to look at each case as it is.
seems that the Rabbi Medame, Kiruv, and Limud Torah, the same Pasha. The question would pose it was Gabi, if someone is out in the world doing Kiruv, doing Chinuch, whatever it is he's doing, and what I'm hearing from the Rabbi is the answer of learning. So it seems that they're both in the same Pasha.
The truth is, there's nothing greater than learning Torah. That's written Befirush in the Hazal, in the Rishonim. There's nothing comes to the level of learning Torah. That's the highest level. But first of all, outreach doesn't have to be just, giving cocktails to Hilonim and, it's also involved with learning Torah. And there are people on different levels. As I said before, we look at each one. If you're going to get someone whose potential is to be a Rosh Hashiva, and we tell him to go to Kikar Dizengoff and we have their cocktail parties with the Israelis, that we can maybe bring some back. We're wasting his potential. It's like taking someone who is a physicist on the highest level, like Einstein, and making a teacher in a kindergarten to play with kids and teach them 2 and 2 is 4. We cannot waste talent. Talent has to be put into place as it is. But for many people, the type of outreach Torah, when they're giving classes and preparing shiurim and saying them over and being the kind of people through learning as well, so it's also good.
So if somebody is doing chinuch, he's out there teaching, but he's financially not where he should be. Should he continue to do the chinuch and not worry about the panach and Hashem will give it to him? Or should he do part-time chinuch and part-time...
I think that question is depending on each individual on his own. Some people don't want to give up their avodas haruchnis, avodas Hashem, whatever it is, and things are difficult, they accept it, and Hashem is going to give them what they need, and it works out. But some people are, their bitochen are not on that level, and they feel that things are difficult, things are tough, and they have to make decisions, so they have to make decisions. I mean, a Talmidim asked me this question. So some I tell them, you have no choice, you have to work part-time. And others I tell them, be strong, carry on, it's going to be good. And, it's a very individual thing that each one has to be dealt with especially, separately.
What about the machlokes between learning and going into kiruv? I mean, you Rob mentioned a little bit, but like Noach, he was going and learning and going in kiruv. Where does the shikol come in that?
We don't know Gdolei Israel, when they learned, how they learned. They say the Alter Mislabotka, no one ever saw him touching a Gemara. In his life, they never saw him with a Gemara. Yet they say every time he gave a shmuz or a shiur even, they were dumbfounded with his knowledge of Torah. So we cannot bring example from Gdolei Israel. They sleep less, they eat less, they have time to learn, they learn, they're on a different level. As I said before, the duty of every Yid is to be a Talmid Chochem and to grow in Torah, and together with that, to do outreach. If a person is lacking in knowledge, the Mishnah Berurah says in his Hakdamah to Hilchas Shabbos, if you don't go over the Mishnah Berurah from time to time, for sure you're going to be Mechalel Shabbos. So we see that in every area, that people have to know halachas, they have to know it well. They have to, we're Yidden, we have to keep mitzvahs. To know mitzvahs, they have to know the halachas, they have to know you have to know it well.
How are we to view all the quickly changing fronts in the world of politics, with the new president and issues with Iran, in light of us being the time of Ikvus of the Mashiach, and the heels of the coming of the Mashiach?
Nothing is predictable. We can't expect anything. We don't know. You get monkeys off the trees, they become president. You get crazy people becoming presidents, crooks becoming presidents. Once they are in that position, it says that Lev Melochim Biyad Hashem. Now he's a robot. His heart is in the hands of Hashem, and Hashem is going to guide him. So we're going to see. We don't know. We cannot expect anything. We cannot rely on anything. that's it. We carry on our lives in Torah and mitzvahs and betochen in Hashem, and we know Hashem runs the world, and we hope it will be good. But it's not that we see anything here, messianic, and we don't know. It could work out just the opposite. I hope not, but there's no guarantees.
So the Rabbi is saying that all the craziness that's happening ever since the bit of the Olam till now, all the crazy things going on, all the politics that's growing and growing, that's not a simon of something that's happening?
Everything is a simon of something that's happening, but we don't know what's happening and when it's going to happen and what's good and what's bad. We don't know. That's what I'm saying. Everything is the hand of Hashem. Nothing happens without Hashem's guidance and His will.
But can one be mechazik himself to say, boy, Mashiach is right around the corner?
You're not far off, because there's not much time. If we just see the predictions, how they have to be, there's time. They're going to be a Yemot HaMashiach. There's going to be a Beis HaMikdash and Karbonis V'Shoigeg and Ari Miklat. We need time for all of that to happen before Tichnas HaMesim. So it means it's around the corner.
Malachi means that the kings are robots. And what does it mean in Tanakh when we see that kings are punished or praised for how they act?
So maybe Jewish kings are a bit different, that they have to be responsible for the actions. They have to take, some of the kings took eitzes from the Nevi'im, Gedolei Ador, But
Nebuchadnezzar was punished.
Say that. They're not going to have it good for what they did.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Can the Rav give us an eitzah how people could achieve clarity in life or in specific situations? What's the best way to always make sure that we're clear in our thinking and our decision making?
They say about Gedolei Israel, if they are asked a difficult question, they say come back in a couple of hours and they sit and learn well, deep, and then they could have clarity. One way is Ha'holech et Hachamim Yechkam. We have to be close to rabbis, to Gedolei Torah, and ask advice, or to our teachers, or for rabbis. Tshu'ah berov yo'etz. Even if to talk it over with a chavrusa is helpful. Al binatcha al tesha'en. We shouldn't rely only on how we understand it. So a good way is to discuss it with others, see how people, understand it, and if we lack clarity, ask a Gadol, ask a Rav. There's no harm in it. It's good.
The impact of secular music when you put Jewish words to it in order to be able to reach Jews who are distant. I want to know what the Rav thought about that.
I wrote a tshuva on that in my tshuvas, V'yashav Hayam. So I quoted this sefer from the Rabbi of Rome 150 years ago, Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Hazan. And he says that if you look around the world, like Eastern communities, Eastern Jewish communities, if they have a simcha, they have musical instruments, they are all Middle East instruments, The type of music is Middle East music. The architecture is Middle East architecture. The clothes. So he says in this Indian there's no the issa of Hukotehem Lo Telehu does not imply. So if you're living in Europe, the style of music can be European or American. The buildings, the architecture, the mannerisms, as long as it's not against Torah, but all sorts of forms of behavior, clothes and music and things like that, they're not forbidden because of Hukotehem Lo Telechu. So basically, the style of music can be whatever you want, pop, jazz, whatever you want. But there is in Indian, it's a big chumrah, which is called Koach HaPoel Benifal. That means the one who created this entity, what did he have in mind? And it has a hashpoah. So if one of the classical composers created music in the honor of Yoshka, and it's church music. So it does have a negative hashpoah. But this is a big chumrah. If he had his girlfriend in mind and he was like reminiscing on his girlfriend, so it has a different type of hashpoah. But it's not from a pure source. Everything is going to influence. If you understand art, if you look at a picture, you see some crazy lines and splashes of color. But if you understand it, it's speaking and giving you a message. Just like music gives a message. So who's the one talking to you? The artist, the composer. What's he talking about? What he has in his mind. What does he have in his mind? It is important to know. In my opinion, Klal Yisrael are way above in every area. They excel in all areas of wisdom and culture. And why do we have to be in this area of music zero? We have to steal songs from the Goyim and put them to Hebrew words. Why do we need it? Let's be creative. We can use that style. We're going to use those instruments. We can have an electric guitar and whatever you want to have. You can have all those. There's no problem with that. But we can create our own music within that style. And I think it's going to come from a pure source. It's going to be have a good hashpoah. So I
what
think.
Does the Rav think about teaching Kabbalah to secular people?
Kabbalah is meant not for secular people, it's also not meant for beginners in Torah. Kabbalah is really, a person has to be a very high level of knowledge of Nigle. As they say, Al Yitayel bepardes ad shemalek riso b'shas u'b'poskim. He has to be on a very high level of midas, of avodas Hashem, b'dikduk rav, mamish, medakdek, tzadik, chosid, and then he can learn Kabbalah. That's learning Kabbalah Sa'ari. But Baruch Hashem, over the generations, we've had Gdolim who have translated these deep concepts into a way that they can be given over at all levels. So, it's not in the Kabbalistic language. Like the Ramchal, in all his form, especially, let's say, Derech Hashem, it's like a translation of the Etz Chaim of the Ari into philosophical language. It's a translation. And when you give it over in his way, it's something everyone must know and can know, and you can teach it. A bit of a higher level, you can teach Nefesh HaChaim, which is very strongly based on Kabbalah, but gives you all the Ikirei Emunah and all the Hasogas and all the Havonas in a way of Avodah. All the Hasidic Sfarim, this is their way. They use Kabbalah concepts for what they call for avodah, to make people better people and be more medaktik b'mitzvahs by knowing what's in it. When you begin to know what's behind it, you relate differently, you see the importance. If you show someone costume jewelry and a real diamond, if he's not an expert, he doesn't see the difference. This sparkles, this is shaped nice, this is shaped nice. But to an expert, this is garbage, and this is worth $30, $40, $50 million. So it's the same thing in other areas as well. So
we thank the Rav very, very, very much.
Pleasure.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.